This is the story of a man named Badman. Badman was a video game reviewer. He would spend countless hours playing video games and then go on to make decently decent videos on how he felt about said games, which thousands of people would watch for no apparent reason. But on this fateful day, all of that would change. Badman awoke on the floor of his room, which he thought to himself was rather odd since his bed was only 2 feet to his right. But choosing to ignore his stupidity, he raised himself from the floor and walked out the door of his room. Oh, no, I don't think you heard me quite right. I said Badman walked through the door and left his room. Badman chose to ignore the sexy voice in his head telling him what to do. He then sat down and tried to play video games, but what he stupidly forgot was that there was no power in his house today and that his TV wouldn't work. Oh, so this is how you want to play it, huh? Alright. As Badman delightfully played his video games, a game case flew through his door, hit him in the head, and knocked him unconscious. You son of a bitch. This is the story of a man named Badman.
This is the Stanley Parable, originally a mod for Half-Life that was made using the Source engine. It has now been upgraded with an amazing HD remake, adding new content and making everything look beautiful. The game revolves around a man named Stanley, who works at a company pressing buttons that a computer monitor tells him to press. But on one fateful day, the unthinkable happens. Stanley stops receiving orders to press buttons, and he quickly realizes that all of the employees in his office have disappeared. And that's when Stanley sets off on his amazing journey to find out what's going on. The Stanley Parable is a game about choices. Just imagine a choose-your-own-adventure book. Except once you make a choice and you realize that your choice sucks, you can't go back to the previous page that you bookmarked with your finger and choose the different ending. And while you're traversing the office, exploring the world, your adventure is narrated by one of the sexiest voices in video game history.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
Now, if you're looking for any crazy kind of gameplay in your games, this is definitely not the game for you. Because other than clicking a few buttons and opening a few doors, there isn't much in the gameplay department. Kind of like Dear Esther, this game is pretty much just an interactive story, but a great one at that. Instead of going the serious route like Dear Esther did, the Stanley Parable takes every opportunity to be funny or just mess with your brain in any way it can. All of this should really be explored for yourself because telling you any of it would just take away from the excitement, and I want your brain to hurt just as much as mine did while playing it. There are so many choices you can make by either following what the narrator says.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Or just ignoring everything he says and doing what you want.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open, this was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well.
There are about 18 different endings to the game, depending what you count as an ending. I enjoyed each and every one of these endings, and after every ending I found myself going, I wonder what would happen if I did this differently this time.
I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not.
And before stupid me spoils any more of the game for you, I'll be heading out, but before I leave, I just have to say that the Stanley Parable is one amazing game and it is worth the money, especially now that the price has dropped a good amount. But now I'm off to find the last secret in the game.
Hey everyone, the Stimpy Land here. Now I know it's been quite a while since my last video, and I apologize for not having so many videos up, but today I'm finally back, and I'm going to describe in great detail why I think Jak and Daxter is mediocre.
And you know, I guess that's why I've always been so biased towards Sora X Cloud fanfiction. It's so beautiful and simple, but at the same time, so elegant.
Who the fuck is this?
Who the fuck am I? You can't just come in here asking me shit like that. Who the fuck are you? How do you like that, huh? Fuck you.
Well, I'm the Stimpy Land. I do reviews of games and whatnot.
Well, my name's Well, I'm Badman, and I do the exact same thing, and well, of course, when compared to the Stimpy Land, my videos are only half as good. The Stimpy Land is much better, sexier, and more handsome. And just amazing. He's the Stanley Kubrick of reviewing games, and I'm just a taco, burrito, eating fart, diarrhea, banana. I'm not reading your script anymore. This is just ridiculous. Who writes that? Who writes that in a collaboration? You are a horrible human being.
Well, anyway, since you're here, you want to do a video with me?
Yeah, man, it's been a while since my last collab. Huh. Now the question is, what game are we gonna review?
I was thinking that we should take a look at what many diehard Crash Bandicoot fans would consider to be a staple in the series. This elusive game being, it's in the title. It's in the title of the video. Just look down, or up, or wherever the fuck they put the title now. It's Crash Twinsanity. Roll the footage. Just get this over with.
I'm the Badman Land, traveling into parts unknown. Now come with me. Join me on my journey to do things!
Hey, that's my intro!
Hello ladies and gentlebutts, I'm back and I'm joined by a special guest, Badman Reviews.
Hi.
This is my first collab, aside from that one other Crash history video which I never followed up on since I'm lazy. If you guys like these sort of collaborative videos, then let me know. I'll do more of these in the future depending on the reaction I get.
This video is going to be a bit of an experiment to see if we can combine two very different styles of reviews and sexiness. My videos go for a more comedic style with random bits of parts that I choose to put in whenever I please.
While my videos are a bit more organized, where I give a general overview of the game and offer my own opinion, while sliding in the occasional joke when I can. Badman's style is relaxed, as mine is more formulated. These are two very different styles, so we'll try hard to mesh them together. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, let us know what you think. So Badman, what game are we reviewing today?
Today we're reviewing Crash Twinsanity for the PS2. And the Sex Box. Crash Bandicoot was a game series that started back on the Sony PS1. These games were platformers that attempted to take the 2D style of the classic Mario games and put them in a 3D environment. The original series was really successful and made Crash Bandicoot the unofficial mascot for Sony that could compete with Mario and Sonic.
Unfortunately, a contract between the developer and publisher of these games expired after the fourth game, meaning that the next games wouldn't be in the hands of the original creators. The next couple of games were mediocre, with only one real exception. The later games of the Crash Bandicoot series were dismissed as bad attempts to relive the success of the classic games.
When you mention Crash Bandicoot, most people just think of the originals. None of the games after Naughty Dog's departure are really that memorable, except for one, Crash Twinsanity. Crash Twinsanity is considered by many to be the last decent Crash game. Stimpy, on the other hand, though, would disagree, but he understands where all this controversy comes from.
This was the last Crash game before a big redesign came along, so it's understandable how people would cling to this game. The calm before the storm, if you will. This is a game that has gotten a really mixed reaction. I mean, with all the Crash games before this, the reaction is pretty black and white. Crash 2? Wrath of Cortex? But believe it or not, me and Badman share a pretty similar opinion on this game. It's okay. Just okay.
It's not really good.
It's not really bad, it's just okay. So anyway, let's start the fucking thing up. The game opens and it's made by, oh dear god, the developers of Wrath of Cortex!
Actually, Stimpy, this game is developed by Traveller's Tales Oxford, not Traveller's Tales Knotsford, the division that developed the Wrath of Cortex. Get it? Because they're not good enough to get into Oxford? Knotsford? It's funny, right? Fuck you.
So the game finally starts up and we're greeted to some cute little title screen music. How quaint.
Anyway, the game opens up like any other classic platformer, with the main antagonist stealing one of the protagonist's clothes and using them as a wait, what? Yeah, let me state early on that this game is fucking out there for a platformer. What a bizarre concept. I really like weird games though, so this is good for me.
Now after our opening cutscene, we find ourselves in Twinsanity Isle, and something you're bound to notice right off the bat is that this game is much more open than previous installments. As all the games in the series had you following a strict path, this game instead gives you more room to breathe, and the objective is more vague. This is cool. Crash Twinsanity, instead of going for a formulaic style like the Wrath of Cortex did, goes for a more Spyro the Dragon approach. There's still an obvious goal and an obvious path to follow, but there's plenty of little nooks and crannies to look in and all that fun stuff.
This wide open area gives us plenty of space to work out the game's controls, which I'd like to point out are actually pretty tight. Crash controls satisfyingly enough and everything works out as expected, so I have no real complaints yet.
So we follow Cortex through the jungle in a lengthy tutorial. This is stupid. The tutorial is so long and it's boring and it can't be skipped. I mean, the tutorials are helpful for newcomers, but we are well into the series at this point. I should be allowed to skip these or turn them off. Plus, before, the game gave us wide open space to play with the controls. What was the ever-loving fucking point of that if they're just gonna make a tutorial anyway?
I'm sure newcomers wouldn't be lost if some of these tutorials just didn't exist. Pretty much everything in this tutorial is obvious or can be found out with a few minutes of playing around with the controls and seeing what works. But at the same time, the tutorial is pretty fucking funny. There is plenty of great slapstick humor in this game, and it is very reminiscent of Animaniacs or Looney Tunes.
I'm okay. The spikes broke my fall.
In fact, I believe this game's story was written by one of the writers of Invader Zim or something like that. I don't know. I didn't check, but I think I read it on a Crash Bandicoot memes post or something. This game had me laughing all throughout. It's not afraid to break the fourth wall. It referenced the poor sales of Wrath of Cortex and even the rough development cycle this game had.
Come now, as we explore a new dimension! It should have been 2 new dimensions, but we ran out of time.
Crash follows Coco to this little arena where she reveals her true identity. It's actually Cortex. No surprise there. Now comes our first boss.
The bosses in this game are a bit weak. Some of them actually prove to be pretty fun, but a lot of them just feel repetitive and boring. Bosses are supposed to get gradually harder as they go along, like how the final boss had more and more stages after each attack in Battle for Bikini Bottom. But practically every other boss in this game is just do the same thing 3 times in a row. In fact, 1 or 2 of these bosses actually got progressively easier as the fight went along. That seems kinda backwards.
For what these bosses lack in challenge and design, they make up for in presentation. Each of the bosses are, despite being repetitive, very memorable. There are plenty of fun dialogue and bosses look intimidating. They look fucking great, and the music that accompanies these bosses is often very fitting. In fact, not only do the bosses look great, but the whole game looks great. I really want you guys to just look at some of the details in these levels. Look at the fucking beams of sunlight. Look at those glowing, mushrooms? Oh, fuck it, they're mushrooms. But seriously, some of the atmosphere in these levels is just amazing for a game like this. The Academy of Evil in particular had a fucking amazing atmosphere.
It's definitely not the best looking game of its time, but for 2004 these are pretty good graphics. The game, for the most part, runs at a really steady frame rate. On occasion in the PS2 version the frame rate will drop during the more intensive moments of the game, but it wasn't a major problem. All in all, the game runs really well and it's got some beautiful environments to run around in. It controls well enough, so I don't have any major complaints either. The only thing that bothered me was the tutorial. Although there is something that annoys me in this game. Why is the camera inverted?
Why is the camera inverted? Why is the camera inverted?
No, I'm not going to do that again. That was a stupid joke, and I feel like an idiot for thinking that would be funny in that old review. No, if I'm really going to go down that path, this is the way I'm gonna do it.
Why is the camera? Why is the camera? Why is the camera? Why is the camera inverted?
After phase 1 of Cortex's fight, we get into phase 2, where we have to fight a giant fucking robot. And I just gotta say, the music in this part is incredibly badass. The soundtrack of this game is made by an a cappella group named Spiral Mouth. If you don't know what that means, all of the music in this game is done only with voices. There's not a single instrument used. The music in this game is incredibly unique, and there really aren't many other games that sound like this. The soundtrack is widely considered the best part of this game and some of the best in the series. And anyone who doesn't like this game's music is just a butt. Right, Stimpy? Stimpy?
Right.
You monster!
Yeah, that's right. I don't like Twinsanity's music.
You sit on a throne of lies!
I think this game's music is annoying.
You sit on a throne of butt sacks.
Yes, I'm acknowledging it, and I'm gonna talk about it. In my old review of this game, I said Twinsanity's music was annoying. Now, I'll admit that I was overdoing it a tad in my old review, but I still kinda stand by what I said. I think some of my most hateful comments came from my old Twinsanity review, which was mostly positive, but because I talked negatively about the music, that somehow warranted all these death threats. I do have to give credit to Twinsanity, its music is one of a kind. There are not many games that have a music similar to Twinsanity's. Very much like Spyro's soundtrack, it is extremely identifiable and recognizable. Also, it's pretty damn impressive. I'll admit that upon first hearing that this game's music was all voices, I didn't believe it. I swore I heard an instrument in there once or twice. Credit where credit is due, Spyro work is impressive. But is that synonymous with it being just really good? I don't know. I can say that most of this is subjective, and that I might be nitpicking. However, this game's music did get overzealous at times. In a few instances, it was so obnoxious that I actually found myself turning the game's music off in the options. No joke, this is actual footage of me pausing the game, turning the music down, opening iTunes, and playing different music instead. There are songs in this game that I actually did like, and for most of the songs that I didn't like, I could say it was just subjective. But there are some songs that make no fucking sense at all, like the music to Slip Slide Ice Capades. Awesome, at first. Halfway through the song, it decides to go into Limp Bizkit mode. It's incredibly annoying. It makes me want to go all Reservoir Dogs and cut my ear off. But that's only one extreme case. I'd say give this game's music a listen. You might love it, you might hate it. It's got a unique, one-of-a-kind style that's incredibly recognizable, but on the other hand, it can be repetitive and it can be annoying. For this review's sake, we'll say the game's soundtrack is average, since it's not really good, but it's not really bad, it's just average. There, was that so bad, man?
Fuck you!
So we move on to the next level, Cavernous Catastrophe, where we see Crash and Cortex team up. That was kind of the gimmick with this game.
You guys remember the old trailers of this game that used to run back on Nickelodeon? They're working together, but they don't have to like it! On the back of the box, they show off all of Crash and Cortex's new moves. Roller Brawl, Twin Slam, Spank, Twin Throw, Humiliskate, and Censored? Twinsanity lets you control a number of different characters. You've got Crash, who's the stock character of this game. Then there's also instances where you get to play as both Crash and Cortex at the same time. These segments are actually pretty cool, whether it be rolling around in a ball, using Cortex as a skateboard and possible sex slave, or just platforming with both of them at once. Twinsanity is constantly throwing curveballs. It's not a game that'll get tiring after a while, and there's plenty of variety to keep you engaged throughout.
We also get two other playable characters, one being Cortex and the other being his cyborg niece, Nina, who's also a new character. Cortex kinda sucks ass in this game. When playing as Cortex, you get to use his blaster. Basically, all you have to do is mash square and just watch everything die in front of you, including your interest in the game. I hear people praise this game as such a phenomenal platformer, yet I couldn't stand these segments with Cortex at all. They were incredibly boring. This was probably the worst part of the game. Nina was different. Not really good or bad, just different. You know, that kinda seems to be a theme with this game. She can use her arm as a grappling hook, which is pretty badass, but that's really it. Hey, at least they tried something different. I just found these segments kinda boring.
Well, you know what? I find you boring.
Thanks.
The gameplay is decent enough. Crash and Nina are fun, and there are plenty of creative ideas that are expressed with Crash and Cortex, although Cortex alone is pretty terrible. But up to this point, we could say that this game is a good game. Well, there's a reason we consider it average. The glitches. Crash Twinsanity glitches are their own YouTube category now. You can break this game in half, and it really isn't that hard. Now, it's true that the glitches don't get in the way too much, because I hardly found any on my playthrough of the game. But the glitches don't make any attempt to hide. It does not take a lot of skill to break this game. It shows that this game clearly did not get the amount of testing that it should have, whether it be Universal rushing the team or just laziness on Oxford's part.
In a way, the glitches can actually make this game a lot of fun. Maybe that's the reason this game is so popular among fans. There are so many glitches in this game that if you try to abuse them, your run of the game can be completely different from someone else's. They offer a special kind of replay value that this game otherwise lacks. However, this obviously wasn't the developer's intent. Oh, and speaking of the replay value, there's practically none in this game. First off, the game is very short and it's very easy. The game only took me about 4 or 5 hours to beat with no glitches. Hell, the thing is as short as Badman's cock. Well, yeah, all the Crash games are generally short, but the replay value is a significant draw to them. What would Crash 2 be without the gems? It would be absurdly short. What would CTR be without all the extra challenges and modes? Incredibly short. Now, it is true that Twinsanity does have gems to collect, but these really don't count. Gems don't come from breaking boxes, but just by doing puzzles and finding them in hidden spots. Finding these gems really isn't hard. At all. It's just tedious. It feels like a real waste of time. True, the gems do give you concept art, FMVs, and other goodies, but only the real nerds like Badman are gonna care about this sort of stuff. Maybe it's because the rest of the game is so short, but I had a difficult time motivating myself to get everything in this game. I just didn't find it that fun. And even with getting all the gems, it's still just a really short game.
Crash Twinsanity is a fun experience, but it's also a very short-lived one. This is a game that you'll enjoy the first time, but you just won't find yourself coming back to very often. It doesn't have the same appeal the older games did, so this game isn't really that good, but it's not really that bad either. It's just average.
Would I recommend this game? I can definitely see fans of the older games liking this, but as a standalone platformer, just judging it as any other, it's pretty weak. If you like this game, that's great. Keep liking it, I'm not gonna make fun of you. I just hope that one day you get to appreciate the likes of superior platformers, such as Jak and Daxter, Battle for Bikini Bottom, Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet Clank, or the original Crash games.
I'm the Badman Land, and I give this game a 10 out of 7.
Fuck you!
Welcome to my big ol' month of Zelda! It's not Zelda month. How am I supposed to do Zelda videos if it's not Zelda month? What am I gonna do?
1 hour later.
And then I was like, welcome to my big old month of Zelda. But it wasn't Zelda month.
2 hours later.
It's me, I'm Luigi, and it's Zelda month. No, it's not, you stupid butt. I hate you all.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
Welcome back, and after 3 hours of crying, I finally realized that I don't need a Zelda month to make Zelda videos. So whenever I feel a good Zelda idea coming on, I'm just gonna go ahead and make the video, and no one can stop me. Other than that super evil bottle of ketchup. Well, since the ketchup has no objections, let's talk about some Zelda. And today we'll be talking about my top 10 favorite Zelda dungeons. And I'll also be including some interesting theories and background stories on some of these dungeons. But the only stipulations I've made for the list is that no endgame dungeons shall be used, since, well, most of the list would consist of them otherwise. So, let's pull out our swords and adventure into some dungeons.
Number 10!
I've always had this love for sky levels in video games, whether it be the atmosphere or the thrill of jumping over giant gaping holes that only lead to cloudy abysses below. And Zelda has its fair share of dungeons like these. But today, the one I'll be placing at number 10 is the City in the Sky from Twilight Princess.
The City in the Sky is one of the largest dungeons in Twilight Princess, bringing on 8 floors total, with each of them all having great puzzles from hidden gems to claw-shotting to secret holes in the wall. But speaking of the claw shot, let's talk about that a little bit more. Up until this point in the game, you've only had one single claw shot to move yourself around with, but the City in the Sky is when you finally turn into Spider-Man and get yourself a second claw shot, allowing you to zip through rooms from one claw shot point to another. And that, my friends, has to be one of my favorite parts of this level. Claw-shotting from one side of a broken bridge to the other while floating over an endless abyss is just so exciting. Or even flying from plant to plant while in the sky and fighting the final boss of the dungeon.
But those are really the only things that make me love this level. It's the claw shot and the atmosphere. But those two things really aren't enough to push it past the number 10 mark. But before we do move on, I have one question. How is it that the Uku with no hands were capable of building this huge floating city? Or is it possible that some other being lived here beforehand? We may never know.
Number 9. Welcome to the Thieves' Hideout, a den of evil, a den of pure hatred, a den of, hey look, a hot girl. Seriously, Link, who lets a chick stuck in jail out of jail just because she's hot? But before we start this story, let's rewind a little bit. Nope, not far enough. Oh god, too far back, too far back! There we go. The Thieves' Den is most likely going to be the first dungeon you enter after entering Lorule, due to its ease of access in the middle of the town square, and it's near where you first awaken in Lorule. But before entering, you have to answer a few riddles that the guard asks you, and to learn these, you can look around the town and ask a few people who will help you out with these answers. Adventuring! Oh... Screw it, I'ma just blow the door down. When first entering the dungeon, you get a nice camera angle of a girl locked in a cell, which is very reminiscent to the Blind's hideout, which is super awesome, but they also do more callbacks to the Blind's hideout, which also includes the final boss battle. And since this is a thief-based dungeon, you can expect tons of traps, puzzles, and treasures, including a master ore, making this dungeon extremely fun to go through. Number 8. Palace of the Winds is the 2D version of the City in the Sky, but better in so many ways. The Palace of Winds is built up really well during Minish Cap, with it being mentioned at the end of the third temple after not receiving the wind element like you should have. Instead, you receive an ocarina, making you wonder where the wind element could be. And that question is answered to you after the 4th dungeon when you make your way to the Palace of Winds. Like I stated before, I love levels based in the sky, and here is another one on the list. But why is it more loved than the City in the Sky? Well, that's because the build up to it, like I stated before, is great. But the puzzles and level design are also outstanding, and this is also where you obtain the Rock's Cape, allowing you to jump and fly for short periods of time, making it one of my favorite items in the Minish Cap. But the coolest part of this dungeon is the quick one it pulls on you after you receive the boss key, making you think the boss is coming soon. But instead, after opening the boss door, you have almost 3 more floors to go through until you actually reach the boss, which really takes you by surprise.
Overall though, there isn't too much to say about this level other than I love sky levels, and this one really does it the best.
Number 7. The Lanayru mining facility is the 3rd dungeon in Skyward Sword, and also the only dungeon in the game to not have a mini-boss. But as weird as that sounds, this dungeon is still outstanding, with it being the first dungeon in Skyward Sword to bring something new to the board, and that thing actually being one of my favorite mechanics in any Zelda game to date, which is using time shift stones to travel from present to past. This dungeon also introduces 5 new enemies and the Gust Bellows, a recreation of the Gust Jar from Minish Cap, but instead of focusing on sucking in air, the Gust Bellows blows air out, clearing out dust and revealing secret areas, and being used to bring out the final boss of the dungeon. The end cutscene after completing the dungeon is also probably one of the best Zelda cutscenes to date, with explosions, excitement, and even a joke at the item collection stance used in every Zelda game so far, which I laugh at every time.
Number 6.
If there's anything that Zelda has taught me, it's to never trust anything at a first glance, or you may find yourself in somewhere kind of like this.
The Shadow Temple has always been an interesting temple in Ocarina of Time that has piqued many people's interest on why it's in Kakariko Village and its purpose in the world of Hyrule. Most assume it's used as a torture or sacrifice chamber, and this can easily be seen by the giant scythes and execution devices scattered around. The cooler theory for the Shadow Temple, though, is that it was built to absorb and consume all evil in the land of Hyrule, keeping it a peaceful place to live. But in turn, it would make the Shadow Temple a festering place of death and hatred, which makes sense. This theory is even more prominent when reading the skull paintings scattered around the temple itself. But outside of the awesome theories that the Shadow Temple holds, it's also filled with an awesome mini-boss and main boss. Plus, it includes a ton of great puzzles using the lens of truth. But I really feel like this creepy death atmosphere is what makes me love this dungeon so much.
Number 5.
I know this may be a surprise to some of you, but out of my favorite video game, Majora's Mask, only one temple will be making its way to this list, and that's gotta be Stone Tower Temple.
Stone Tower Temple is the final dungeon featured in Majora's Mask, which brings challenge and surprise to the player. And since this is the first temple where you are familiar with all of your masks, you'll be using all 3 of your transformations to solve many puzzles. Also, you recently learned the Elegy of Emptiness, so be ready for a lot of this. Except for, not that cool. But with that one gripe for this dungeon put aside, this dungeon is really outstanding, bringing together a vast array of puzzle ideas including lava, water, air, and light. But the greatest puzzle of all inside this dungeon is the ability to flip the whole dungeon upside down. This flipping mechanic makes for some extremely challenging puzzles, where a chest that gave you a few rupees can now be a much needed hookshot point, or a room filled with water now being emptied into the sky, allowing you to explore a room in completely different ways. This level also consists of 3 mini-bosses and a final boss, making for some exciting entries in this dungeon, never mind the included Giant's Mask you get to beat up the final boss with. There are also a few speculations around Stone Tower, which talk about it being the home of the creators of Majora's Mask, since the inverted face in the tower looks oddly like Majora's Mask. The other speculation is around the idea of the tower, since it was originally being built as a way to climb to the heavens, but as the gods learned of the efforts being made, they inverted the tower, causing it to be built to, well, hell.
The atmosphere for the dungeon is also outstanding, with all the beautiful structures and weird symbols all over the place. It's really great on the eyes, but we still have 4 more dungeons to go.
Number 4.
The Sand Ship from Skyward Sword is yet another great dungeon that uses my favorite game mechanic that I have already mentioned before: time travel. The Sand Ship level heavily uses a single time shift stone in the middle of the ship to move the ship from past to present, which allows you to see the ship in its current stuck in a pile of sand form, and its past form where it's actually sailing through a beautiful sea. The time shift stone is used heavily in this dungeon, making it so you have to find a way to hit it to escape a locked room, or even just hit it and switch from past to present to finish a tricky puzzle. Its use of enemies is also really cool, having Bokoblins in the present dirt ship, and when switching to the past with the more well put together ship, you get the Techoblins, who use electric weapons that shock you when you hit them the wrong way. Plus, receiving everyone's favorite item, the arrow, is just that much more of a plus, because why shoot tiny seeds at people when you can just shoot them in the face with a shiny sharp piece of metal? And I know the boss of this dungeon gets a horrible rap, and I can understand why, but I still enjoy the fight, and I do consider the mini-boss fight to be an outstanding fight, which really reminds me of the old sword fights from Sid Meier's Pirates.
And it's dungeons like these that really make me love Skyward Sword more than a lot of other Zelda games.
Number 3.
When it comes to background stories and awesome theories, there is no better dungeon than the Arbiter's Grounds.
The Arbiter's Ground is filled with great backstory, which includes the failed execution of Ganondorf, causing him to be banished to the Twilight Realm instead. The Arbiter's Ground was also used as a prison where convicts were either executed or banished, which is very prominent in the ghosts and Stalfos seen throughout the dungeon. And lastly, it's also theorized that the Arbiter's Ground and the Spirit Temple from Ocarina of Time are indeed the same place, due to both of them being found near Gerudo Desert and sharing many architectural similarities. But outside of the creepy ghost stories, the temple is filled with many great ideas. Though it is a bit on the short side when it comes to puzzles because the dungeon's more focused on finding your way to specific areas, it doesn't really matter too much because there are plenty enemies to kill, including cute tiny Stalfos, extremely creepy Poes you have to kill to progress through the dungeon, and well, lastly, an amazing final boss that just reminds me of pinball.
Number 2.
Now, I've already talked a good deal about why the Ice Ruins from A Link Between Worlds is one of my favorite dungeons, a la this video here on my top 10 winter levels list. So if you click that, it will bring you directly to the part talking about this dungeon. But if you wish to hear my thoughts here briefly without having to click away, here's a top 10 within my top 10. Number 1, the boss key is the first thing you get in the dungeon, making you really excited to explore. Number 2, the fire rod is used a lot in this dungeon, and I like the fire rod. Number 3, you have to walk on super tiny paths, but the game designers weren't dicks and didn't make them slippery. Number 4, for an ice dungeon, not too much slippery places to make you want to stab yourself. Number 5, seeing the whole dungeon as you go down the elevator is an awesome idea. Number 6, it looks cool. Number 7, I like burning shit. Number 8, I'm running out of ideas. Number 9, it reminds me of Smash Master's Cold Dead Heart.
I am Satan, Lord of Darkness.
I think I just had a war flashback.
Number 10, because I like it.
It's me, number 1.
We have arrived at number 1, and it has been a long journey. And well, future Joe editing this right now probably hates his life. You've got to be kidding me! Oh, I hate my life. But it was all worth it for you guys, so now let's hop right into my number 1 pick.
The Ancient Cistern is an amazing dungeon that can only be described with one beautiful sentence. It's the only water temple that everyone seems to love with a passion. This level takes all the horrible parts of a water level and completely takes them away and just leaves the beauty that is water to make your eyes just cry at how beautiful it all is. The gold surrounded with beautiful fresh waterfalls and lily pads makes for an exciting adventure, but this temple isn't all beautiful. No, it has its opposites too. Down below you will find a deadly dungeon filled with zombie-like bokoblins and poisoned water, and you may be wondering what a horrible place like this could be doing in such a beautiful temple. Well, it's really an easy answer. The ancient cistern is actually based off of an old Japanese story known as the spider thread, where a criminal attempts to escape into a paradise by climbing a small spider thread, which just adds another majestic layer to this temple. All of this plus amazing puzzles, a pretty cool item, and one of the best and definitely most fun to fight bosses in the history of Zelda makes this my #1 pick out of any dungeon in the Zelda franchise.
I'd just like to thank all of you watching right now for, well, watching all the way through. I know it must have been a long trek since this is one of the longest videos I've made in, well, a long time. So I'd like to thank you one last time, and well, if you have any ideas, any at all, I mean like anything, for what you want to see me do in the future, post it in the comments below because I would always love to hear your ideas and thoughts. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Oh, I didn't see you there, sorry. I was just practicing controlling space and time, but I have better things to do like making reviews for you guys. So I'm gonna stop controlling space and time, killing dragons and saving the world so I can show you guys a great review on Ratchet & Clank, A Crack in Time. Ratchet & Clank was a game originally developed for the PlayStation 2 by the creators of Spyro the Dragon, and the series was and is still widely claimed to be a masterpiece to this day. But when Ratchet made the transfer to the PlayStation 3, he seemed to be a little underappreciated and not talked about as much. Was it because the games just weren't good anymore? Was it because everyone just wanted to get their Call of Duties on? Or instead, was it just because no one was interested in Ratchet & Clank anymore? I myself find it very curious, and that is exactly why I want to take a look at and review Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time. When first starting up Ratchet & Clank, we are greeted with an absolutely beautiful cutscene, showing off the difference between the PlayStation 2 games and what the PlayStation 3 can really bring to the table. And it's just, well, mind-blowing. But as we make our way through this cutscene, we are reintroduced to one of the fan-favorite villains from the original trilogy, known only as Dr. Nefarious. And he's just as hilarious as he was before, with great dialogue and cutscenes through the whole game, always getting you excited to see what he does next. And what he does in this first cutscene is extremely important, as he releases Clank from his prison by accident, allowing you to start playing the game. And right off the bat, things are fairly interesting, since you're dropped into an unknown area with little to no knowledge of what is happening, except you are trying to escape the evil claws of Dr. Nefarious. It's also interesting in the fact that it's the only game in the Ratchet & Clank series where you begin with Clank instead of Ratchet, which overall doesn't change much but lays the foundation for the game, allowing you to understand where Clank is and why he isn't with Ratchet when you start playing as him. And speaking of Ratchet, after a cutscene with more nefarious fun,
The Great Clock! A marvel of science and sorcery, engineered by the brightest Sony in all of existence, and constructed in the exact center of the universe! Give or take 50 feet.
we are introduced to Ratchet's side of the story.
Space. It's huge. So huge, in fact, that if you lost your car keys in it, they would be almost impossible to find. Luckily for Ratchet, Captain Copernicus L. Quark was on the case. His mission, rescue the Lombax's one and only friend. Yep, without Clank, Ratchet was alone in the universe. Alone. Alone. Alone.
You realize this ship has an ejector seat, right?
That's right, Ratchet is stuck in space with Quark while searching for Clank. But more seriously, how does this guy fit in this ship? It blew my mind in the old games and it blows my mind now. He must have some serious back problems. But shortly after the current conversation, their ship gets hit by an unknown energy burst, causing them to crash to the planet below in the most comical way imaginable. After the most ridiculous crash ever, we finally get a hands-on experience with Ratchet, and just like every other game, he controls flawlessly with smashing boxes, strafing, and shooting feeling as precise and fun as ever, but with many more interesting features. Some of these include Ratchet already having a lot of the standard gadgets he receives in every game, making the gameplay fast and interesting right off the bat instead of slowly growing as the game progresses. Another interesting concept added to this game was taking the standard weapons you start with in every Ratchet game and allowing them to be upgraded with Constructo mods to work in multiple different ways to use them. Plus, you can change the colors of all of them to look however you want. So, I personally made all of mine to look like Nerf guns. A few more small features that I'd like to mention are multiple new crate types added, including invisible crates, crates that change what they give you depending when you hit them, and even giant crates. There are also multiple new ways of obtaining bolts, including smashing items around the map, walking through tall grass scattered around the levels, and whenever you find a gold bolt. Now after a short adventure with Quark, you make your way to a village, capture some Zoni, and Quark gets himself caught. What a surprise. But our ship is fixed and we must fly out into space and save Quark, and holy moly, this is such an improvement from the norm in a Ratchet & Clank game. Being able to fly around and explore the different galaxies and land on mini Mario Galaxy-esque planets with no load times at all is awesome and great for anyone who enjoys finding secrets, exploring different locations, and having tons of side quests. Never mind the space battles also included. And what would space battles be without space music? And you get the choice of choosing which radio station you want to listen to by selecting the 4 different channels using the D-pad, which includes the House of Synth that plays electronica music, Pirate Radio with Slag and Pete from Tools of Destruction as the DJs who talk about pirate news and play rock music. Polaris Classical, which plays original classical music and some of the old orchestrated tracks from the old games. And lastly, the Deep Space Jams channel, which features some of the coolest jazz in the galaxy. So as you jam out to your favorite space jam, we head on over to save Quark and shoot our way through a spaceship to meet our first boss of the game, Lord Vorsalon. The bosses of A Crack in Time might just be some of the best in the series, including 3-headed dragon robots, giant monsters, space battles, and even a giant robot.
Stall it? It's the size of a building!
It's so big, it's clipping through the buildings! Yeah, there are some noticeable glitches throughout the game, which included me getting flipped upside down in this specific part, making me have to kill myself and restart the area. Also, having our friend that we meet later in the game, Alistair, running non-stop into a wall, which really didn't affect the gameplay, it was just kind of funny. There was also things like grinding on nothing in midair and just the crate physics in general acting wonky all the time. But back on track, after defeating Lord Vorsalon, we're switched back to Clank and get to play around with his gameplay a bit more. And this happens often throughout the game, adding some much needed variation, bringing in awesome puzzle ideas which use time mechanics to make multiple versions of yourself to open doors and click buttons to exit a room. It's a real interesting concept, and some of the later puzzles actually get really complicated. The second type of puzzle you'll find yourself doing as Clank is much like the lockpicking mechanics from the older games, but in this one you use a laser to delete time anomalies scattered around a specific planet. And truthfully, these puzzles are really easy and kind of just throwaways since they only appear a few times and are really simple. They don't add much to the game, sadly, and I thought it would have been more interesting if they made it so fixing things as Clank would change and fix areas that Ratchet himself could actually visit, allowing you to get to new areas or secrets. But sadly it doesn't do much at all other than give you bolts or a golden bolt for a special secret one if you can find it. After playing Clank for a bit and learning some more information on where you are and what you're doing here, we jump back over to Ratchet and get our first hands-on experience with some tournament battles, which have always been my favorite parts of the Ratchet games. Fighting waves and waves of enemies and testing your skill has always been awesome to me. The battle arena in this game is actually really sweet since there are a ton of things to do, including a top-down Quark arcade game, and making fun of the Argonians in the crowd is always a fun time. Wow, check out these guys, they're ridiculous. The guy in the background there, he keeps eating his popcorn, like literally whole. He eats it and then eats the bucket. Never mind the guy below him continuously sucking on his pop, swallowing it, and then grabbing a new one. No wonder the Tachyon behind them is scared and like crying in his pants. I'd be scared too if everyone around me was eating their food and then swallowing the buckets whole. Jeez, no wonder these guys are fat. These tournaments will take all of your skill and weapons to complete, which means you'll find yourself using some weapons you haven't used yet just to survive, like cryo mines or maybe even the Groovatron glove that makes everyone dance. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. This giant monster dances, every possible boss including Dr. Nefarious dances, and even the best weapon ever, Mr. Zircon, dances too. It's just an epic dance party.
Mr. Zircon enjoys a boogie.
Alongside the many weapons you can use, there are plenty of gadgets to have fun with, aside from the standard grind boots, gravity boots, and swing shots we are so used to by now. We also get a gun that lets us move liquids around, and hover boots for when you gotta go fast.
Go, 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 gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. Gotta go faster, 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 faster.
Seriously, using these hover boots made it feel like I was playing a Sonic game, and it was awesome zipping from one area to the next with these boots. The last thing I've been waiting to mention, since it's my favorite part, is traveling between past and present. And this isn't some badly put together time travel mechanic. It's actually really cool. Bringing you to different looking areas and changing things in the past actually affects the future, or even changing the whole map depending on what you change in the past. And as someone who really loves time traveling in games, I loved when these mechanics were brought into the game. It's just too bad that they weren't brought in sooner. They were brought in so late that they weren't really used much, which was kind of upsetting to me. But overall, A Crack in Time brings an interesting story and fresh gameplay that the series is just needed and hasn't gotten in a long time. Plus, it's probably one of the best Ratchet & Clank games in the whole franchise, and it makes me wonder why I didn't hear about any of the games after the PlayStation 2 trilogy. Kinda makes me upset that I didn't play this game when it first came out, but I am excited to get my hands on Into the Nexus and play that one for sure. I am going to have to recommend this game to anyone and everyone. It's an outstanding game. Even if you haven't played the Ratchet & Clank franchise, play this game. It's beautiful in so many different aspects. If you love side quests, if you love tons of different guns to blow people up, it's great. Trust me. Go out, find a copy. It's pretty cheap. pick it up and have a good time. Ratchet & Clank Going Mobile is a game that not many people have heard of, never mind had the chance to actually play, and that's for one standout obvious reason. It was only developed for one of these. Yep, Ratchet & Clank Going Mobile was designed specifically for cell phones, and touch-tone ones to be exact. And according to the back of my Tools of Destruction manual, I can text the keyword clank to force Sony to actually buy the game. So let's give it a try. Yeah, sadly texting for Sony doesn't work anymore, so that means playing the game in its original form is kind of impossible, aside from downloading a jar off the internet and manually putting it onto the phone. But seeing as I do have to get gameplay of the game, and doing that off of this thing definitely isn't going to happen, let's do this the fun way. This is a Java emulator, and I know you're all gonna be like, ooh, emulators are bad. Well, you know what? That's the only way that I can record the gameplay for this video. So suck it up and watch as I play an old school cell phone game with a PlayStation 3 controller. Now, the first thing I really noticed when starting up the game is that the audio quality is actually really well done, with multiple beats and tones that I really wouldn't expect to hear from a cell phone. Though it does seem like most of the audio memory and quality was put into this first screen because, well, just listen to this sexy level music. Yup, there is actually no audio at all during the game whatsoever, except for gunshots, breaking boxes, and pausing the screen. I do understand though that this lack of music is all due to hardware issues and not enough memory to hold it all, so that can be forgiven, especially since the quality of the sound effects are actually really well done and resemble the same sound effects from the PS2 version really well. Gameplay wise, this game actually has a lot more than you would expect from something of this caliber. To make things a bit more clear, there were two versions of this game, one for Series 40 phones and another for Series 60 phones. What you're looking at now is the Series 60 game, since its image quality is higher and includes more levels and titanium bolts. Yeah, you heard me right, titanium bolts. And that's not the only mechanic that was taken from the original game and brought into this one. Some other awesome features include 7 weapons that can actually be upgraded to do more damage, a shop to buy ammo and guns, and a battle arena with 11 challenges in it. All of this plus 12 levels included in the game can actually keep you busy for a long time, though not everything is perfect and beautiful obviously, since it is only a cell phone game. So there are a few downsides I need to mention. One being that every gun in the game makes the exact same sound effect, meaning that the Lancer makes the exact same sound effect as the Rhino, which just doesn't seem right when firing it. Another thing is that breaking boxes in this game just isn't fun. To put it in simpler terms, when playing a 3D Ratchet game and you swing your wrench, it moves you forward so when you're ready to swing again, you're in front of the next group of boxes. But in this game, when you swing your wrench, there is almost no forward momentum, meaning you have to swing, then manually move forward, and then swing again until everything's gone, removing the fun of smashing your way through a ton of crates super fast. I also noticed that there were invisible turrets scattered throughout the whole game, though I don't know if they were intentional or not. They are pretty much plain annoying, especially since they can cause you to glitch into a wall if you get near them. Luckily enough though, you can still blow them up just by shooting where you see their bullets coming from, so it's not too much of a hassle. The last nitpick I have about the game is that there isn't too much variation in level design and enemies, since from what I've noticed there was only 3 different level backgrounds that were reused many times, just with a different level layout for each place you visit. Plus, there was also only 4 enemy types in the whole game. though some of these enemies did shoot different types of bullets to add some sort of variation. Most of these things are really small problems and are mostly due to the game having to be on an old cell phone, but with beautiful pixel art unlockable guns, including one that turns enemies into pigs, a final boss that's actually pretty hard, a challenge mode that makes the game harder the second time you play through it, and hidden titanium bullets scattered around all the levels that you use to unlock the Rhino, there is actually a lot of replayability here for what it's worth. Ratchet & Clank going mobile is surprisingly a really well done game, especially for a cell phone. And not surprisingly, it actually received a reward for Best Action Game at the 3rd Annual Mobile Entertainment Awards, and was going to sport itself a sequel titled Ratchet & Clank Clone Home, though the game was eventually cancelled due to interfering with the Size Matters timeline. We'd never get an actual mobile game after this one until before the Nexus came out, and sadly that game was just a very bad Temple Run ripoff. So maybe one day we'll actually get another really good Ratchet mobile game, but till then, I'll just be sitting back, relaxing, and waiting for the movie to come out. Welcome to my 10,000 subscribers special, and I only have you guys to thank for this, so thank you so much for supporting me through all of these years. And today I've decided to celebrate this momentous occasion by talking about one of my favorite video game consoles. And you guys may know that the first console I personally owned was a Nintendo 64. It's not the console we're going to be talking about today. My favorite video game console is actually the PlayStation 2. Look at that sexy beast. Now, the reason for this is because I had a next door neighbor, like many of us do. And he was my best friend. We hung out all the time, and every weekend he would rent 2 games for a full week, one being a solo game and the other being a co-op game. So I have many fond memories of playing the PlayStation 2 with my friend and having so much fun just randomly screwing around in co-op games. So I decided to make a top 20 list of my favorite PlayStation 2 games, and this list has to be the hardest thing I've ever done on this channel. Picking just 20 PlayStation 2 games out of all of the games that I know was very difficult. So let's get this list on the roll, and if a game that I like is on this list that you hate, I'm sorry. Number 20.
Let's go.
Barbarian is a game I have never been able to find after playing it with my friend for 1 week, and I would love to get my hands on it, which would be easy since it's like $4 on Amazon, but I never buy anything online, so I'm kinda screwed in that aspect. The game was an arena-style fighting game developed by the now-closed company Sapphire, who were mostly well-known for porting games to the Game Boy Advance. Remember some of your favorite Game Boy Advance games like Lego Bionicle, The Hobbit, or Around the World in 80 Days? Me either. Who could forget those classics? But overall, this game was just a huge time killer for me and my friend. From throwing each other through all the breakable scenery or launching each other into different stages just to see what would happen. And the game also features a handful of fighters, plenty of weapons to skewer your friends with, and up to 8-player battles. The game wasn't amazing, but I still remember all the fun times I had playing it with my friend. Plus, the loading screen was like 2 skulls that floated around, and each player can control one, so we kinda played tag with them. Yeah, we were really cool. Number 19.
Let's go.
Let me get this out of the way right off the bat. 187 Ride or Die is in no way a good game, but I still have come to love it for so many different reasons. But only the multiplayer. This is another one of those multiplayer games I played all the time with my friend. But this one is a gangsta game where you drive for your life and try to kill the head honcho of the enemy gang, known only as Cortez. When playing cooperatively, one player takes control of driving while the other gets to shoot at all the other enemies while trying to blow them up and help you win the race, making for some awesome teamwork-based moments, especially in the more intense races. And for whoever's seen my top 10 hardest bosses video, you know that I believe this game has the hardest boss ever. So if you think you're up for a challenge, grab a friend and try to beat this game, because trust me, you and your friend will have a blast shooting gangsters. Number 18.
Let's go.
Now that we've got the not that great racing game out of the way, let's talk about one of my favorite racing games, Midnight Club 2. I played the crap out of this game when I was younger and loved every second of it. The characters are all memorable and interesting, and the racing just feels so right. From pulling wheelies to 180-degree spins, it's just one of the most intense arcade racers I have played. Especially with the built-in free roam and cheat codes you can use. Wanna fly off a ramp at 1,000,000 miles an hour, do some flips, then shoot rockets and machine guns at other cars? This is the game for you, because the cheats let you do all of that. Plus, being able to play in 3 different cities with tons of cars is always awesome. Number 17.
Let's go.
Onimusha 3 is a game that I remember my friend playing all of the time when we were younger, but I could never remember the name of it. The only things I could remember was a French guy, a sewer, and a random building in France. And with just that information, I ended up finding the game and buying it. Onimusha 3, for those who don't know, is a game developed by Capcom, following Japanese samurai Hidemitsu Akechi on his quest to stop Nobunaga Oda from taking over Japan. But in the third game, we get a bit of a scenario change. This game uses time travel to bring our samurai warrior to the present time in France. But for those who were fans of the original series and their old Japanese setting, don't worry, because we meet a new character based on and voiced by French actor Jean Reno, and he switches places with Hidemitsu and heads to the past. I would have loved to put this game higher on the list, but I really haven't even had the chance to play it past the first couple of levels. And I really think that after I played a bit more, this game will definitely move up on my list for sure. Number 16!
Let's go!
ATV Off-Road Fury 2. If any of you know this game, then you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. This game has to be the most fun I've had in any free roam racing game. I haven't even touched the story or main races at all in this game. I would just pop it in and me and my friends would have hours of fun on the free roam mode. From having all my friends driving out of bounds at the same time to see who can fly the farthest across the map, or exploring every nook and cranny and finding any secrets you possibly can. Or going to Arlington Stream and just having endless hours of fun running into the front of the train or driving on the train itself in the level. There really isn't too much I can say about this game other than free roam with friends and driving on a train is awesome. Number 15.
Let's go.
Dynasty Warriors 4 is the end-all, be-all when it comes to Dynasty Warriors games for me. I feel like this was the last game where they really stopped trying to improve and just kept putting out the same thing with better graphics. So this is currently my favorite Dynasty Warriors game until I play Hyrule Warriors. So it was obvious for me that this game had to be on this list. This is another one of those games I would play with my friend for countless hours. And since he owned the game, he would always be a higher level than me and kill more people than me, which always sucked. But I dealt with it because it was a fun time. Seriously, who could not love slashing through hordes of thousands of enemies, killing anything in your path with special moves and awesome weapons? Number 14!
Let's go!
As someone who loves rhythm games, a few of them were obviously going to make this list, and this particular one is really outstanding, and if I could only play it just a little bit more, it would definitely be higher on this list. The game I'm currently talking about is Rez. Rez is a game I've only been able to experience a little bit, but I've thoroughly enjoyed from what I've played. The game is designed by some of the original team who designed the Panzer Dragoon series, and the game is heavily based around electronic music and has a very interesting game mechanic for a rhythm game. As you fly through the air and shoot targets, the hits you make with enemies causes different sound effects to be heard which match the beat of the song. But the coolest part is that the better you do while traveling through these levels, the harder the final area in each level will be. The game was designed this way to help casual players still enjoy the game, and also introduce some form of replayability besides the bonus modes you unlock after finishing the game. I do know there was an HD version released for the Xbox 360, but I haven't had the money or chance to purchase it, and I would really like to find a copy of the game for the PlayStation 2, though I know it is one of the harder games to find on the system. So until I can get my hands on it and really play through it and enjoy it, it'll probably stay lower on my list. Number 13!
Let's go!
There comes a time in every system's life where it gets that hilarious game that's somehow also just amazing, but somehow gets overlooked by every single person who owns the console. That game for the PlayStation 2 is The Bard's Tale. The Bard's Tale features some of the funniest humor I've had the pleasure of hearing from any video game, with some great combat and story added on top just to make it even better. The game also features a choice system allowing you to be snarky or nice, which usually changes the outcome of a situation. The game also has its fair share of musical numbers that I can still remember to this day. Beer, 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 tiddly beer, beer, beer. A long time ago, way back in history, where all there was to drink was nothing but cups of tea. Along came a man by the name of Charlie Mops, and he invented a wonderful drink and he made it out of hops. As you can tell, the game knows exactly what it's trying to be and makes fun of its genre and many others in multiple ways. Plus, combat is fluent and ever evolving. The start of the game is a bit slow, but once you get past the first hour, you'll start to fall in love with this game. Trust me, I did, so you should too. Number 12.
Let's go!
Big buff dudes fighting half naked. I can't do it. I can't. It was really hard for me to pick which Dragon Ball Z game I would put on this list, and I knew for sure it wouldn't have been any of the Tenkaichi games, and I wasn't a fan of the second Budokai game, so it was between the first and third game, and eventually I decided on Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. I was a huge fan of the original, but the third game just improved on everything in the game so much. From the story mode to the tournaments, and adding even more characters, it was just awesome in so many ways. Being able to play characters from not just Dragon Ball Z, but also Dragon Ball and GT was a welcome addition to the trilogy. And I know many of you are wondering why I picked the original trilogy over Tenkaichi, and I for one just didn't enjoy the change for the combat system. I know all my friends loved it, but I just really enjoyed the 2D style more than the 3D style of gameplay that the Tenkaichi series brought. Number 11.
Let's go!
Here we are at number 1. Kind of put them together, because it's 11, but it's actually kind of 1, because this is 2 parts, and this is the number 1 pick of part 2. You get what I'm saying? And what could possibly be number 11? Well, This is the part where I usually tell you to just be quiet and wait, and I'll tell you, but you know what? I feel like being nice today. So I'm gonna tell you to be awesome, and that you're awesome, and you should keep being awesome. Using the word awesome too much, aren't I? Whatever. Here it is, number 11! When I was younger, I never got to play the Jak and Daxter series or the Sly Cooper series, and I still really haven't except for the first game of both series. And Sly Cooper definitely stuck out to me as an awesome game that I can't wait to play the next two of. But for now, I have to say that this game was outstanding. A great amount of challenge and fun was brought with some really interesting characters that I instantly fell in love with. I can really see why people instantly fell in love with this series with how much love was put into it and how new of an idea it was. Yes, Metal Gear Solid was already a thing, but this was the first time I can think of where a stealth-based game was used for more of a childish vibe than a mature vibe, and it was definitely welcome, and I can't wait to play Sly Cooper 2 and 3. I would just like to thank all of you guys for helping support me to 10,000 subscribers. I still can't believe it when I say it. It's amazing. Thank you all so much. And while you're here, make sure to stick around and check out the top 10 PS2 games next week. Or if it's out right now, click right here. But if not, wait until Friday and check that out because there'll be a lot more games that you probably recognize on that list, since this one was kind of games that I felt like no one would really know about. But who knows, maybe you know them all. Maybe you're some crazy PS2 guy like me. But till next time, I'll see you all in the next video. Welcome back to my 10K video special, but let's just quit the talking and jump straight into my top 10 PS2 games because intros are for losers. Number 10!
Let's go!
Rayman 2 is an amazing Nintendo 64 game. So, you may be wondering why I'm talking about it. And that's because it received an amazing remake titled Rayman 2 Revolution. I have always loved the old 3D Rayman games, and I played Rayman 2 on almost every console available for it, except the PlayStation 2, because I didn't even know it got an enhanced version till I was talking to my friend Cat Icarus about it, and he informed me that I definitely needed to pick it up. So heeding the words of a great friend, I found a copy of the game and purchased it. And to my surprise, the game has been fully upgraded, including better graphics, more missions, puzzles, powers, new characters, and even an added overworld to make the game much less linear. All of this added content just makes a game I loved so much as a kid that much better than it ever was before. And who can't love an upgraded version of a childhood game? I doubt you could. Number 9!
Let's go!
The Simpsons is basically a TV show that everyone knows. Like, your grandma knows it, your mom knows it, your aunt knows it, even your 5-year-old nephew knows it. It's just that well known, and obviously with that kind of fame, video games are to follow. But I don't think anyone expected a Grand Theft Auto-esque Simpsons game to ever be a thing. Simpsons Hit and Run was a surprisingly outstanding game that blew my mind when I played it for the first time. With its open world and many missions, there was just so much to do, from finding collectibles, beating missions, and even unlocking plenty of outfits and cars that are based off of actual episodes from the show. Me and my friend actually played this game a ton, and we would make up our own missions and challenges for each of us to complete within a certain time frame or just casually. It was so much fun. Plus, all the actual missions were exciting and really interesting, from Bart trying to get a copy of Bone Storm 2 and seeing Truckosaurus, or playing as Apu and trying to find out the mystery behind why Buzz Cola is intoxicating everyone in the town. Plus, who could forget the awesome Halloween-themed town? This game was just an amazing homage to the TV show and really stands on its own as an outstanding game. Number 8.
Let's go.
I've been trying to think for a while on how I was going to introduce this game, but nothing's really coming to mind. So, here's Digimon World 4. I suck at this. Digimon World 4 is a game that I had mixed feelings on when first playing. Digivolving is really only a side part of the game that, from my understanding, is fairly pointless and only seems to be a form of New Game Plus for your character. Plus, the fact that your Digimon fight with guns and swords was totally off-putting for me. All of this added with a huge difficulty spike early into the game put me off really quickly. But after giving it another chance and playing it co-op with a few friends, this game was actually amazing for an adventure beat-em-up game. The guns and swords ended up playing really well into the dungeon crawling aspects of the game, and the difficulty spike isn't too bad once you really learn the mechanics of the game. Plus, leveling up your Digimon and getting stronger always felt so exciting because you were working your way to new levels and new Digimon to see and fight. If you can deal with the crazy difficulty spike at the beginning of this game, you really have some amazing boss battles and interesting levels to look forward to. But sadly, me and my friend were actually never able to beat the final boss of this game, and since the last time I owned it, the price of the game has drastically gone up in price, so I don't think I'll be playing it anytime soon.
Number 7. Let's go.
When most people look at this game, they see a crappy commercialized TV show game. Pretty much like any other TV show game that's ever existed. But when I look at this game, I see an amazing platformer that I think went underlooked by so many people. Battle for Bikini Bottom is an outstanding platformer, probably one of my favorite platformers aside from a few others. It performs flawlessly, keeps in touch with the source material while adding more to it, has an outstanding voice acting cast throughout the game except for a few characters, and a beautiful soundtrack added on top of all of that. It was hard choosing if I wanted Battle for Bikini Bottom or the movie game on this list, but I ended up deciding on this one just due to me remembering more about the game, plus I just have a nostalgic love for it. Venturing into all the places in Bikini Bottom and being able to explore all the areas you saw in the TV show was just too much fun to even describe.
Number 6. Let's go.
A long time ago, I considered Kingdom Hearts 1 to be my favorite game in the series, as can be seen in my top 10 favorite games video. But since then, I've played Kingdom Hearts 2 for the second time, and I really found myself enjoying the game much more than I did with the first one. Kingdom Hearts 2 actually brought so much more to the series, with more enemies, what I believe to be better worlds, and being able to dual-wield Keyblades makes this game just that much more exciting for me. Plus, the Pirates of the Caribbean level was a great addition to stray away from the normal Disney levels that the first game had. I also loved Roxas and his addition to the story, and the little tournament you have to go through in the beginning of the game. Plus, revisiting the area as Sora was a really interesting experience that I found myself enjoying way too much. But overall, I found Kingdom Hearts 2 to just be a way more enjoyable experience than Kingdom Hearts was, and that it improved on many of the ideas and aspects in the first game.
Number 5. Let's go.
Now, I'm not a huge fan of RPGs that require grinding and random encounters, and there's really only a few that catch my eye, and that's Paper Mario and Xenoblade. But there just happens to be one of them that has found its way onto my list, and that game is Rogue Galaxy.
Rogue Galaxy is another game that I haven't had the time to fully complete, but I've fallen in love with. The combat system is amazing, and the way you level up and unlock abilities and power-ups is just so intriguing to me. For those who don't know, to unlock new abilities, you must take items you find in the battlefield, chests, or shops, like healing potions or other useful items, and insert them into slots in your revelation flow. And once you finish a section, you unlock the ability that's attached to it. This style of learning abilities makes me excited to fight new enemies, not just for the experience, but for hopes of items that may help my revelation expand and unlock new abilities. Another idea that the game uses that I absolutely love is the hunter ranking, which gives you a rank among many other hunters. As you kill more enemies, you gain more points, climbing the leaderboards. And as you progress through the game, your rank can actually go up or down, which really makes it feel like an actual competition. These two things, plus beautiful planets to explore, interesting characters, and an outstanding story, I couldn't help but fall in love with this game. And for those who don't know, this game was made by Akira Hino, who is well known for his work on Dragon Quest VIII, the Dark Cloud series, Professor Layton, and Ni no Kuni. So with all of these outstanding games under his belt, you have to know that this game must be something special.
Number 4. Let's go.
Now, I feel like a lot of you have been probably waiting for this one. So let's get it out of the way so we can all get excited about it and then move on to the next one. Number 4 is Ratchet Clank, Up Your Arsenal. I feel like not much needs to be said about Ratchet & Clank since it already has a huge following, and really, who doesn't love it? But I find myself really loving the third game the most out of the trilogy, just for a few reasons, like the amazing weapons in the game, the armor, the amazing battle arenas, don't forget about the Quark vid comics, and some of my favorite planets out of the first 3 games. Whenever I find myself wanting to play a Ratchet & Clank game, I always come back to the third game because overall, it's just the best one in the series.
Number 3. Let's go.
Now, a while back, I mentioned that Battle for Bikini Bottom is one of my favorite platformers, but not my absolute favorite, and that's for one reason, because that honor belongs to Psychonauts. I love Double Fine and Tim Schafer so much. They've brought us so many great games, and one of those is Psychonauts, one of the most outstanding platformers ever made. Psychonauts is a game about a boy with psychic powers and his adventure into people's minds to try and save the world from evil. This means you get to explore some of the most amazing levels, and by exploring these levels and finding collectibles, you don't just unlock more abilities, but you'll learn more about each character in the game, and it is one of the smartest ways a video game has ever let you experience a character's background. I don't think I can describe how beautiful and fun these levels are, from levels based on board games, or being a giant kaiju monster, or whatever this is. I enjoyed this game so much that I had to 100% it the first time I played through it, and I've beaten it so many times since then. It's also really easy to fall in love with all of the characters in the game, and how could I not fall in love with the main character Raz, since he's voiced by my favorite voice actor Steven Horvitz, also known as the voice behind Invader Zim. If you haven't played Psychonauts, do yourself a favor and pick up a copy, whether it's on PlayStation 2 or Steam, because you totally owe yourself the favor of this. It's an amazing game. And Tim Schafer, if you're watching this for some random reason, who knows, make a Kickstarter for Psychonauts 2. Please. Me and so many other people would back that so hard.
Number 2. Let's go.
As I stated in part 1 of this video, I love rhythm games. and this rhythm game just happens to be the best game to have ever blessed entering these 2 ears. Welcome to Guitaru Man. Guitaru Man is the most abstract rhythm game I've played, right up there next to Parappa the Rappa. There are a ton of wacky bosses and characters that will always keep you on your toes on what they'll do next, like a jazz playing bumblebee or a space shark that transforms into a robot. What else can you ask for besides for some of the most memorable music you've ever heard? I even use some of these tracks in my own reviews, and Born to Be Boned from this game is one of my favorite video game tracks to ever exist. I never did play the PlayStation 2 version that much, but I did play the PSP version way more than I should have. Guitaru Man will always be my go-to rhythm game when I just need some crazy rhythm game fun.
It's me, number 1. Let's go.
For those of you who haven't already expected this for the longest time, my number 1 pick for my favorite PS2 game ever made forever and ever of all time is Shadow Colossus. I really could sit here and go on a giant rant on how the game is so beautiful and expansive, and how you're introduced to the first massive Colossus, and how much I love every single aspect of the game. But all of these things have been mentioned so much in plenty of videos across YouTube. I personally find huge enjoyment from this game for all of those reasons. But there is something that I really enjoy in this game that no one else really does. Exploration! I don't know how this isn't talked about more when Shadow of the Colossus is mentioned. This game has a huge overworld map for each Colossus to live in, and you can freely explore any area you wish. And yes, I know there really isn't anything to find or gain from exploring, but seeing all of the beautiful areas and temples in the game is just so exhilarating. Being able to be like the Indiana Jones of the Colossus world is just so much fun to me. With the huge overworld to explore and the already amazing and beautiful gameplay of discovering Colossi and climbing their bodies to finish them off, I couldn't ask for anything more from a game. If there was ever a game that I had to state as a perfect masterpiece, this game would be one of my top choices. Music, design, gameplay, and the game feel for this game is just perfect to me. Now if we could just get Last Guardian, I would be even happier. I just want to thank all of you for watching this 10,000 subscriber special. It's just still blowing my mind that I've passed 10,000 subscribers, and making this video really meant a lot to me. So thank you all for watching. You're an amazing viewer base, especially the bad guy in Germany who's a US soldier. Just knowing that there's people in different countries watching my stuff blows my mind. So wherever you guys live, thank you for watching. Have a happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. And I'll see you all in the next video.